you ever work the night shift alone? When the rain outside makes every sound feel louder? When the fluorescent lights hum just enough to hide the noise of something moving down the hall? Before we get into this story, if you enjoy real horror stories told exactly as they happened, hit subscribe and keep your lights off, because tonight's story might just make you look over your shoulder before the night's over. It was a Thursday night, one of those late spring nights where the rain doesn't pour, it falls steadily, like it's been waiting all day to start. I was working alone in a small accounting firm on Ridgeway Street, doing overtime because our system migration had gone wrong earlier that week. The office was nothing fancy. 6 cubicles, a break room, 2 bathrooms, and a narrow hallway leading to the main entrance. The building itself was old, one of those early 90s commercial blocks that smelled faintly of printer toner and damp carpet. Most nights, the silence was comforting, but that night, the silence felt different, almost heavy. Outside, I could hear the rain tapping against the windows, mixed with the low hum of the air conditioner. Every now and then, a passing car would throw streaks of light across the walls before vanishing back into the storm. I remember checking the clock, 11:47 p.m. My shift ended at midnight, but I still had 3 reports to finish. That's when I noticed something odd, the sound of typing. It was faint, maybe coming from one of the cubicles down the hall. I froze for a second, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It wasn't the usual echo of my own typing. This was different, slower, more deliberate. The first thing that crossed my mind was that maybe Mark, our IT guy, had come back for a late fix. But Mark always announced himself. He was loud, and he'd always stop by my desk to joke around before doing anything. I got up, stretched my back, and called out softly, "Hey, Mark, that you?" No answer. The typing stopped instantly. I waited. The only sound left was the rain, steady and rhythmic. After a few seconds, I told myself I was probably just hearing the rain hitting some loose vent or something. I went back to my desk and tried to refocus on the numbers in front of me, but that uneasy silence returned, the kind where every creak feels like it's responding to your thoughts. At 12:04, I finally shut down my system. The lights in my section dimmed automatically as I logged off, leaving the faint glow of my screen as the only light in the room. I grabbed my coat and umbrella, but before I could leave, I realized my office keys weren't on the desk. I clearly remembered placing them next to my coffee mug earlier. So, I started checking around, under files, behind the monitor on the floor. Nothing. Then I heard it again. Only this time, it was closer, like just across from my cubicle. I froze. My stomach felt heavy, like something cold had dropped inside me. I leaned slowly to peek over the cubicle wall, expecting to see someone's silhouette lit by a monitor. But there was nothing. Just darkness. Still, the typing didn't stop. It kept going for another few seconds. Click, click, click. Then silence. I whispered again, "Mark?" No response. I finally grabbed my phone and used a flashlight to check the cubicles, one by one. Empty chairs, empty desks. Each computer screen was dark, powered off. When I reached the last cubicle at the end of the row, I stopped. The keyboard that was wet. A few drops of water had splashed onto it, soaking into the keys. And yet the ceiling above was dry. I touched the chair. It was cold, like it had been sitting near an open window, except all the windows were sealed tight. For the first time that night, I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. I went back to my desk, locked my phone screen, and sat down, trying to shake it off. I told myself I was exhausted, overworked, probably imagining things. But my pulse wouldn't slow down. When I finally opened my locker to grab my bag, I saw something that made me stop breathing for a second. My office keys. They were inside my locker, on top of my lunchbox, and I hadn't opened that locker all night. The air felt thick, heavier than before. That's when I heard the softest sound yet, a whisper. It wasn't clear, like someone speaking through glass. Just a low, drawn-out tone, coming from somewhere near the break room. I stood frozen, listening. It came again, a little louder. A slow, dragging sound, like a word being stretched too far. That's when the lights flickered. Just once, quick, almost too fast to notice, but it was enough to make me realize how dark the corners of the office were. I grabbed my phone again, flashlight on, and started toward the break room. The rain outside was hammering now, echoing through the vents like footsteps above the ceiling tiles. The break room door was slightly open. Inside, I could see the reflection of the hallway lights bouncing off the microwave door. Everything looked normal, until I noticed the coffee pot. It was dripping, not just a little, a steady stream, like someone had just poured coffee minutes ago. But I hadn't made any coffee that night, and no one else was here. Then, from behind me, the sound of a chair sliding across the floor. I spun around, shining the flashlight down the hall. Nothing, but I knew what I heard. I slowly backed away toward the exit, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. When I reached the main door, I tried turning the lock, but it wouldn't budge. It was like it was jammed from the inside. I turned it harder, feeling panic start to rise. That's when I noticed something outside the glass door. A shadow, tall, still, just standing there in the rain. The street lights behind it flickered from the storm, but the shape didn't move. It wasn't holding an umbrella, just standing there, head tilted slightly to one side. I stepped closer, squinting, trying to make out details. It looked like a man, but his face, it wasn't facing me. It was facing the door, but not aligned, like his head was turned too far. My phone flashlight hit the glass, and for half a second, I swear I saw eyes, pale, unfocused eyes, staring right back at me through the reflection. I stumbled back, dropping my phone. The light flickered across the carpet as it hit the floor, and when I picked it up again, the shadow was gone. The rain kept pouring outside. The office felt alive with sound, the hum of lights, the tick of the clock, my own breathing. I told myself I was leaving now. I didn't care if the system hadn't saved my work, but as I reached for the main switch by the door, I realized something that made my whole body freeze. The front door was wet on the inside, like someone had pressed their hands against it from my side. The door was wet on the inside. That detail wouldn't leave my head. I just stood there, staring at the faint hand-shaped smudges across the glass. They weren't clear fingerprints, more like the streaks you'd leave when you press your palms against glass for too long. Except these were fresh, and I hadn't touched that door since I walked in hours ago. I wanted to believe it was just condensation from the storm, but the air conditioner had been running all night. The inside of the office was dry and warm. Still, I needed to get out. I turned the lock again. It twisted halfway this time before stopping. I jiggled it, but something was wedged in the latch. I could feel the cold air seeping through the small crack between the doors, carrying the smell of wet concrete and rain. Then I saw it, a small piece of something dark wedged in the bottom hinge. I crouched, shone my phone flashlight at it, and froze. It was cloth, a piece of black fabric, torn and damp, jammed right where the door's rubber seal met the frame. It wasn't there before. That's when the hallway lights flickered again, once, twice, before steadying. The power grid was usually solid in our area, but tonight, it felt like the building itself was struggling to breathe. I backed away from the door and headed toward my desk, planning to call security. We shared a night watchman with the other businesses in the complex, but when I picked up my phone, I noticed something strange on the screen. The time was wrong. It said 2:07 a.m. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I'd looked at the wall clock not long ago. It was just after midnight. I glanced up. The wall clock above the filing cabinets said 12:19 a.m. Both couldn't be right. And then the second hand on the wall clock stopped moving. It didn't tick. It just froze, like time itself had held its breath. At that exact second, the rain outside seemed to fade, replaced by a dull, low hum, like an electrical vibration deep within the walls. I held my breath. The sound wasn't coming from the lights or the vents. It was coming from below, the floor. I crouched, pressing my ear to the damp carpet. The hum was there, steady, rhythmic, almost like a slow heartbeat. And it was moving, getting louder as it passed beneath me. That's when a loud click broke through the silence. The sound of one of the bathroom doors unlocking by itself. I nearly dropped my phone. There were 2 bathrooms in the office, one for staff, one for clients. Both were at the end of the hallway. From where I stood, I could just see the client restroom door, slightly ajar now, light flickering from inside. I should have left right then, but my brain wouldn't stop whispering, "You're the only one here. This doesn't make sense. Find out what's going on." So I started walking down the hallway, slow steps, my shoes pressing softly into the damp carpet. The closer I got, the colder it felt. When I reached the door, I nudged it open with my elbow, phone flashlight shining inside. Empty. The mirror above the sink was fogged up, even though there was no steam, no heat. Just faint condensation, like someone had been standing there, breathing slowly. And written into that fog, across the middle of the mirror, were 3 words. "You locked it." I stared at it, completely frozen. The writing wasn't dripping. It wasn't fading. It looked like it had just been written seconds ago. Then, from the hallway behind me, came a soft shuffle. I turned, shining my light down the corridor empty. But now the hum under the floor was gone. Instead, the air felt charged like static. I slowly backed away from the bathroom. My hand brushed the wall as I walked, and that's when I noticed something cold against my fingers. A water droplet. It slid down the wall, slow and deliberate, leaving a thin, dark trail. Then another droplet, and another. I turned the light toward the ceiling, and that's when I saw it. The trail of water leading from the ceiling vent. But it wasn't rainwater. The smell hit me before I could think. It was metallic. Sharp. Blood. My stomach turned. I staggered back, nearly tripping over a chair that hadn't been there a moment ago. The hum returned, but now it was different. Slower. Deeper. Like someone breathing through the walls. Every instinct screamed to run, but the front door was still jammed. My only other option was the back exit, the one near the storage room. I started toward it, clutching my phone like a lifeline. That's when all the lights went out. Pitch black. I froze, my flashlight beam shaking as it cut through the darkness. The rain outside was now a constant roar, thunder rolling closer. Then footsteps. Not from outside, from inside the office. Soft, deliberate steps, coming from the row of cubicles behind me. I turned the light. Empty aisles. Empty desks. But the sound didn't stop. It circled, moving slowly toward the center of the room. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice trembling. No answer. The footsteps stopped. Then, from somewhere close, a whisper. Not words, just breath, right behind my left ear. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just my own reflection faintly shining in the window glass, and something standing behind that reflection. A tall figure, still, watching me through the glass. But when I turned, no one was there. The rain outside intensified, pounding so hard it rattled the window panes. The lights flickered once more, and in that brief moment of illumination, I saw it. A handprint, on the inside of the glass again, and right beneath it, 2 wet footprints leading away, deeper into the office. I followed them. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me refused to accept any of this was real. The prints led down the main hall, past the cubicles, and stopped right at the break room door. I pushed the door open. The air inside was freezing. The dripping coffee pot was still running. Only now, the liquid inside wasn't coffee. It was dark red. The pot overflowed, spilling slowly onto the floor, forming a puddle that glistened under my flashlight. I stepped back, heart pounding, trying not to breathe too loudly. Then, from the far end of the room, a chair moved, slowly dragging itself away from the table. And sitting in that chair was someone, or something. It looked human at first glance. A man in a silk black coat, water pooling beneath him. His head was tilted down, hair dripping, obscuring his face. I whispered, "Sir, are you okay?" No movement. I took one step closer, and the overhead light flickered. When it came back on, the chair was empty, but the wet footprints had changed direction, now leading back toward me. That's when I ran. I bolted down the hallway toward the back exit, my shoes splashing through small puddles on the floor that hadn't been there seconds ago. The hum in the floor grew louder, almost deafening, like it was chasing me through the walls. I reached the exit and slammed into it. It flew open this time, cold rain hit me square in the face. I stumbled out, gasping for air, and turned back. But what I saw made my blood freeze. Every single light inside the office turned on at once, and standing by my cubicle, facing the window, was that same tall figure. Soaked, motionless, head tilted too far to one side. He was inside, watching me leave. I don't remember running to my car. I just remember fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. When I finally started the engine, I looked back one last time. The office was dark again, completely dark. The next morning, I quit that job. I told my boss I was sick, and then I told him I wouldn't be coming back. He didn't question it. He just said, "That's okay. You're not the first." When I asked what he meant, he hesitated, then said quietly, "The last guy who worked at shift, he disappeared one night during a storm. If you're still listening, I want you to do one thing for me. Next time you're working late, and the rain starts to fall, turn around, just once, and make sure you really are alone. And if you love true horror stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to Forgotten Screams, because the next story might just be the one you can't forget." Most people don't think of radio stations as lonely places. They imagine bright studios, flashing lights, people laughing on air. But the truth is, when you work the night shift, it's just you, a microphone, and a storm outside that never seems to end. I've been hosting the Midnight Hour on 97.3 FM, a small-town station off Highway 19, for almost 4 years. It wasn't glamorous, mostly local requests, late-night callers, and an occasional ad read for small businesses. The pay wasn't great, but I liked the quiet. At least I used to. That night started like any other. The rain had been falling since sundown, steady and relentless. By 11:15 p.m., thunder was shaking the metal siding of the station, and the air outside had turned that pale, greenish-gray you only see before bad weather. I parked behind the building, went inside through the back door, and clocked in. The control room lights buzzed to life, filling the space with that warm, familiar glow. I always left one light off, the one over the guest chair, just because I liked the shadows. It made the studio feel like it was floating in the dark. About halfway through my shift, I started getting static on the monitor. It wasn't unusual. Storms mess with the signal all the time. But this was different. The static wasn't random. It had rhythm. At first, I thought it was feedback. But then I noticed something. The static was pulsing. 2 quick bursts. Pause. 2 more. Like breathing. I leaned closer to the soundboard and tapped one of the channels. The pattern stopped instantly. Then, from my headphones, a whisper. It was faint, almost masked by the rain outside, but it was there. A man's voice, low and cracked, saying something that sounded like, "Do you hear me?" I yanked the headphones off and stared at the mic. The signal light was red live. That made no sense. The microphone wasn't supposed to be on. I hadn't cued the line. I flipped the switch off, and the red light faded. The studio fell back into that thick, wet silence only storms bring. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was interference. Some truckers' CB channel bleeding into our frequency. But then the phone rang. We never get live calls that late. Only pre-recorded ones we played during breaks. But the line was flashing, steady and insistent. I hesitated, then picked it up. 97.3 FM, this is Alex. You're on the air. Static. Then a whisper again. The same voice. This time clearer. Don't go outside. I froze. The line went dead. I tried tracing the call, but the number just showed up as unknown. At that point, I honestly thought someone was messing with me. There's an old diner across the street where the early morning truckers hang out. Maybe one of them decided to play a prank. But when I looked out through the glass window toward the parking lot, I realized something unsettling. There weren't any lights across the street. The diner's sign, usually glowing red and white, was completely off. The whole highway was pitch black. I could barely see past the rain, but something about the darkness outside felt wrong, like the storm had swallowed everything. The only light for miles came from the radio booth itself. I turned back toward the console and froze again. The mic light was on, glowing red, but I hadn't touched the switch. I reached to turn it off, and then a voice came through. Not from my headphones this time, from the speakers themselves. It was soft, distant, like someone talking in the next room. You shouldn't have turned it off. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. The voice wasn't coming through a channel I recognized. The soundboard meters weren't moving. It was just there. And then the speakers crackled, and I heard something else. The faint sound of rain, but not like outside. It sounded closer, like it was inside the building. I turned off every channel, one by one. Still, the rain sound continued, softly trickling through the static, mixed with quiet breathing. Then, right through the monitor speaker, the same voice whispered again, calm and almost gentle. "You locked the wrong door, Alex." I stared at the back exit through the glass window, the one I had just come through earlier that night. It was wide open. Rain was blowing inside, pooling across the linoleum floor. I ran over and slammed it shut, heart pounding, locking it twice this time. When I turned back toward the studio, I noticed something that made my throat tighten. There were wet footprints leading from the doorway into the main hall. Bare footprints, and they weren't mine. The power flickered once, twice, then cut out completely. Instant darkness. The only sound left was the rain hammering on the roof, and that faint static, now whispering through the room even though everything was unplugged. I turned on my phone flashlight. The beam caught the reflection of the studio window, and I saw something behind me. A figure, just standing there, inside the recording booth. It wasn't moving. Its face was hidden by the dim red glow of the on-air light that had somehow turned back on. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. The figure leaned slightly toward the microphone, and through the static came one word, sharp and unmistakable: broadcast. Then the speakers erupted, every channel flaring to life at once, flooding the room with a deafening wall of noise. Through it I heard voices, dozens of them, overlapping, whispering, crying, laughing, all saying different things. And buried deep in the chaos was my own voice, replaying something I had said earlier that night. "This is Alex, and you're listening to the Midnight Hour." Except the voice didn't stop there. It kept talking, kept saying things I never said. "Don't leave. He's not done yet." The lights flickered back on for just a second, and in that flash I saw the figure, clearly for the first time. Tall, drenched, its face twisted into something that didn't look human anymore. Its eyes were hollow, but its mouth moved in sync with my own voice coming through the speakers. I ran. I didn't stop to shut anything off. I didn't care about the broadcast or the equipment. I just sprinted down the hall toward the emergency exit. But as soon as I reached the door, I saw something that stopped me cold. The security camera monitor by the exit, the one that loops the outside feed, was still powered on, flickering faintly from its backup battery. And on that screen, I saw the front of the building. There was someone standing there, soaked, head tilted to one side. The same figure, except now it was outside, and it was facing the door I was about to open. I took one step back, and the power went out again, complete black. And in that darkness, a whisper from right behind me. Broadcast. That was the last time I ever worked at 97.3 FM. When the station manager came in the next morning, he found the back door locked from the inside and muddy footprints leading all the way to the mic stand. My headset was still sitting on the chair, dripping wet. They said the storm knocked out the broadcast for half the night, but when they checked the audio logs, they found a full 6-hour recording of the show. Only it wasn't me talking. It was someone else, repeating one sentence over and over again. "Do you hear me now?" They called me in 3 days after the storm. By then, the power had been restored to the town, and most people had already moved on, except the ones who listened to 97.3 FM that night. I worked freelance for the county, mostly technical forensics, system diagnostics, that sort of thing. The station manager wanted me to inspect their main transmitter logs to see why the broadcast didn't match the recordings. When I got there, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Wet carpet, burnt dust, and old coffee, mixed with something faintly metallic. The station was small, one hallway, a control room, and a glass booth facing the highway. Everything was silent except for the faint hum of the backup generator. I'd never been inside a radio studio after hours before. It felt wrong, like it wasn't built for silence. The manager, a short guy named Ron, met me in the doorway. His face looked pale and sleepless. He said, "You'll see what I mean when you play it." He handed me a USB drive. "This is the backup recording from that night. It shouldn't exist. The power was out for 6 hours." I asked him where the night host, Alex, was. He hesitated. "Hasn't come back. His car was found down the road out of gas. Key still inside." That's all he said. I plugged the drive into my laptop, put on the studio headphones, and hit play. At first, all I heard was static. Just the usual empty white noise you get when nothing's broadcasting. Then, faintly, I caught something underneath it. A voice. Male. Calm. Familiar. "This is Alex, and you're listening to the Midnight Hour." The station jingle followed, perfectly normal. But then, "It's raining again," he said softly. "Harder now. The power just went out, but we're still here together." The tone didn't sound like radio. It sounded intimate, like he wasn't speaking to an audience, but to someone in the same room. The longer I listened, the stranger it got. In the background, I could hear faint tapping, like fingertips against glass. At first, I thought it was from the storm, but it had rhythm, slow, deliberate. I fast-forwarded about 30 minutes. That's when I heard it. A second voice, barely audible, deeper, slower. Broadcast. Then silence, and Alex whispered back, "I don't want to." The air in the studio felt colder suddenly. I paused the audio, removed the headphones, and looked around. The booth was empty, but the glass between me and it was covered in faint, foggy streaks. Condensation, in perfect handprint shapes. I kept listening. I had to. Another hour into the recording, the static thickened, almost like the storm was inside the feed itself. Underneath it, multiple voices started to merge. Men, women, even children, whispering, crying, laughing, overlapping into a pattern that didn't sound random anymore. I tried isolating frequencies, running filters, but the deeper I went, the clearer it became. It wasn't random noise. It was words. All the voices were saying the same phrase. "Do you hear me?" Over and over, hundreds of times, layered and echoing. Then, faintly through all that chaos, Alex spoke again. "I think I do now." The next few seconds of audio were distorted, loud interference, like someone dragging metal across the floor. Then, out of nowhere, the signal cleared completely. No static, no background, just a quiet room, and Alex's voice calm, distant. "If you're hearing this, don't look for me." My heart dropped. He paused, then whispered, almost to himself, "It's stronger when it rains." And then the feed cut. No ending, no outro, just silence. I sat there for a while, just staring at the screen. The timestamp on audio said 3:42 a.m., right around the time the storm was at its worst. But here's the thing that doesn't make sense. When I checked the transmission logs, there was no broadcast during that window. No signal leaving the tower. Nothing. And yet, dozens of people in town claimed they heard the midnight hour that night, all describing the same strange voice telling them to stay inside, to keep listening. I checked the hardware next, the power relay, the server rack, the backup generator. Everything looked normal, until I opened the booth door. There, sitting on the floor under the desk, was Alex's headset, still plugged in, still wet. I was about to leave when I noticed something through the glass. The on-air sign, the one that's supposed to light up only during live broadcast, flickered faintly. Just a quick pulse of red, like a heartbeat. Then the static returned, soft, almost human. I put the headphones back on and leaned toward the mic, just to test the feed. "Hello," I said softly. A pause. Then, "Do you hear me?" The same voice. Alex's voice. But it wasn't a recording. He said my name. "Ron." I froze. The voice was shaky now, distant, like it was calling through layers of wind. "It's raining again. Don't broadcast." And then nothing but static. The on-air light flickered one last time, then went dark. I pulled off the headphones, shaking, and ran straight out of the studio. The county shut down 97.3 FM a week later. They said it was for technical restructuring. But the truth is, no one wanted to go near that building anymore. On rainy nights, locals say you can still pick up faint whispers if you tune to that frequency. A broken signal cutting through the static. Sometimes they say it's just static, but sometimes you'll hear a man's voice saying, "Do you hear me?" And if you answer out loud, the storm gets louder. People think working the night shift at a storage lot is boring. Honestly, most of the time it is. You sit in a small office, surrounded by cameras, drink coffee that tastes like metal, and wait for the morning guy to relieve you. That night, though, the night the rain wouldn't stop, I realized boredom was the least of my worries. It's been 2 years since then, and I still can't explain what I saw. It had been raining all week, but that night it was relentless, kind of downpour that makes the air heavy, like the whole world's being washed away. I was alone in the office, heater humming, staring at the grainy black and white feeds from the security monitors. Rows of metal doors, floodlights flickering through sheets of rain, nothing moving. I leaned back, scrolling through my phone, when suddenly one of the monitors blinked. Unit B12. The motion sensor lit up. Now, that wasn't unusual. The sensors sometimes picked up rain or rats, but the camera feed showed something strange. The door was half open. That door had been locked since the day I started working there. I grabbed my flashlight, pulled up my hood, and stepped outside. The rain slapped hard against the asphalt. My shoes were soaked by the time I reached the second row of units. I could see B12 from a distance. The corrugated metal door was slightly bent, open just enough for darkness to pour out like smoke. "Anyone in there?" I called out, trying to sound confident. No response. Just rain hammering the roof. I pointed the flashlight inside. Empty. Dust, cobwebs, and the faint smell of rust. I pushed the door back down, locked it tight, and trudged back toward the office. As I walked, though, I heard it. A sound behind me. Metal sliding. I turned around. B12 was open again. I remember standing there, rain dripping from my hair, staring at that open door and thinking, maybe the latch slipped. So I locked it again, checked it twice, even tugged hard on the handle, then went back inside. The office felt colder when I got there. The heater was still on, but it was like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. I looked at the monitor and saw something that made my stomach twist. The feed for B12 showed the door open again, but this time there was a shape standing inside, not moving, just standing. I leaned closer to the monitor. The shape was tall, but the camera quality was terrible. It looked like a shadow molded into a person. The strange part was the reflection. The rain behind the unit was visible, but the shape cast no reflection at all on the wet ground. For a second, I thought maybe it was a glitch, some kind of digital burn-in. So I switched to another camera, then another, and on every screen, the figure was gone, until I came back to B12, and there it was again, closer to the lens now. I swear I could see a face, pale, with water running down it, eyes wide open like it had been standing in the rain for hours. That's when I realized it wasn't just standing inside the unit anymore. It was standing in front of the camera. Even now, when I think about that night, I can still see those eyes. It's like they weren't looking at the camera. They were looking through it. If you've ever worked alone during a storm, you'll understand how that silence gets into your head. You start hearing things, tapping, footsteps, your own heartbeat echoing off walls. And if you've ever felt that cold pressure in the dark, then you'll want to stick around till the end of this story. Because what I found later that night made me question everything I thought I knew about that job. And hey, if you're still here listening, it means you love a good scare. So hit subscribe to Forgotten Screams, because the next few minutes might make you rethink ever working a night shift again. When I look back at the monitors again, every screen had gone black, except one. B12. There was movement inside. Slow, shuffling movement, like someone dragging their feet across concrete. I grabbed my radio, called out to dispatch. No response. The The power flickered. The monitors blinked off. For a second, everything went dark, and all I could hear was the rain hitting the roof. Then a faint sound. It wasn't the storm. It was music, like an old lullaby playing through static. It was coming from inside the storage lot's PA system, the one that hadn't worked in years. The tune repeated, warped by static and echo, until it suddenly cut out with a harsh crack. And in the silence that followed, I heard a voice whisper through the speakers, "Come back." I froze, staring at the dark monitors. The word echoed again, drawn out, distorted by feedback. "Come back." Then the power surged back on. The lights flickered, the monitors reconnected. But now, all 12 feeds were showing the same image. The same metal door. Unit B12. Only this time, it wasn't raining, and the door was wide open. Something was standing inside. I could see it clearly now, a tall, soaked figure, face pale and twisted like it had drowned long ago. When the screen went black, I thought the power had gone again, but the lights were still on. It was just the cameras. Every feed frozen on that same image, the open door of B12, and that pale figure standing in the dark. I don't know how long I sat there staring. It felt like the air itself was humming. The storm outside had softened, but somehow the silence inside the office was worse. Finally, I stood up. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe some sense of responsibility. But I grabbed my flashlight again and stepped back into the rain. The air smelled like ozone and metal. Every light along the lot flickered as I passed. Rows of identical metal doors stretched ahead, water running down them like tears. When I reached the second row, I stopped. The door to B12 was shut tight, padlock hanging there, glinting under the floodlight. But I had seen it open. I had seen someone inside. I walked closer, my boots sloshing through puddles. When I got near the door, I noticed something scratched into the metal, letters, carved deep like someone used a key or a nail. "Let me out." My breath hitched. I stepped back, shining the light over the grooves. The words looked old, rusted around the edges, like they'd been there for years. The wind howled suddenly, rattling the metal doors up and down the row. Then, from inside B12, came a dull thud. Once, twice, then silence. I froze. I told myself it was thunder, or wind, or a rat trap behind the walls. But then came the dragging sound, like something heavy scraping across the concrete floor inside the unit. I raised my voice, though it cracked when I spoke. "Who's in there?" No answer, just a faint shuffle, closer this time. Then something hit the inside of the door. Hard. The padlock jumped against the latch. I stumbled back, heart pounding, flashlight shaking in my hand. The floodlights flickered once, twice, and then everything went dark. The only sound was the rain, and breathing. Not mine. It was coming from just beyond the door. Slow, ragged, wet. I started backing away when, without warning, every door along the row began to rattle. Bang, bang, bang. Dozens of them, all in rhythm, shaking violently like something inside was trying to get out. The sound was so loud I had to cover my ears. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The rain, the rattling, the wind, everything. Dead silence. And from somewhere deep inside the lot, I heard a voice. Faint, distant, distorted by the storm. "Unit B12. I turned and ran, past the rows of units, past the office, all the way to my car. But when I reached for my keys, my heart dropped. The car was already running, headlights on. I was sure I'd left it off. I walked around it slowly, scanning the windows. Rain dripped down the glass in steady sheets, and through it, in the driver's seat, I saw movement. A hand, just resting on the steering wheel. I blinked, and the hand was gone. I yanked open the door. Empty. The engine sputtered out. I sat there in the quiet, soaked and shaking, trying to breathe. That's when I heard it again, from the office speakers behind me, faint, static-filled. "Come back." I turned slowly toward the building. Through the rain, the office lights were on again, and on the monitors, even from that distance, I could see it. All 12 screens, every single one showing the same image. The door to B12. Open. The next morning, I quit. Didn't even pick up my last paycheck. A week later, I got a call from the owner. He asked if I knew anything about what happened during that storm. I asked what he meant. He said when they came in the next morning, B12 was open, padlock snapped, door bent backward. Inside, everything was soaked, like someone had poured water all over the floor. But there was nothing stored in that unit. Never had been. And in the middle of the concrete, there was a single puddle, perfectly round, still rippling, even though the air was dead still. He said it looked like rain was falling there, but only there. I've driven by that storage lot a few times since. It's always empty now. The office boarded up, cameras removed. But every time it rains, I can't help glancing in that direction. Because sometimes, just for a second, I see a light flicker near the second row of units. And if you look long enough, you can see someone standing there. Tall, still, soaked to the bone, watching the road. And if you slow down, if your wipers smear the rain just right, you might see the numbers painted on the door behind him. B12. You've just listened to the storage lot during the storm. A true story from someone who swore they'd never work another night shift again. If you felt that chill down your spine, if you imagine those footsteps behind the door, then you're exactly who this channel is for. Make sure you subscribe to Forgotten Screams, because next time, the rain might be hitting your window. Maybe it's just something about the rain, something in the sound of it, the rhythm, the repetition, that brings buried things back up. When you're alone on the night shift, the rain becomes company. It fills the silence. It hides the noises you don't want to hear. And sometimes, it hides the ones you should. 3 people, 3 different jobs, and one thing in common. They all worked alone when the storm rolled in. A gas station attendant who heard knocking when the doors were locked. A late-night radio host who broadcast from the dead air itself. And a man who opened a storage unit that should have stayed sealed. Different towns, different years, same rain. Every story had the same pattern. The power flickers, the signal distorts, and then something calls out, quiet, patient, like it's been waiting for someone to notice. Maybe it's not the places that are haunted. Maybe it's the hours, those long, empty stretches between midnight and dawn where the world feels hollow, and every echo sounds like a whisper meant just for you. It's funny how every one of them said the same thing in the end. They all said, it got louder when it rained. After I released the first story, someone emailed the channel. No name, no details, just a short message. It said, check the dates. All 3 storms happened the same night. I looked it up. They were right. Different cities, miles apart, but the same thunder pattern, the same lightning front, the same blackout wave moving east to west, the same rain. So maybe that's all it takes, one long storm, and 3 people awake when the rest of the world is asleep. And maybe whatever was inside that storm wasn't done yet. If you ever find yourself working alone during a thunderstorm, don't ignore the sounds. That tapping on the window, that whisper behind the static, that shadow that looks a little too still on the camera feed. Because if these stories are real, and I think they are, then the rain doesn't just fall, it listens. And sometimes, when it listens long enough, it answers. If you felt that cold shiver, that moment where your heart slowed just a bit, then stay with us. Hit subscribe to Forgotten Screams, because the next storm could bring another story. One that starts the same way, with the rain.